a case study in resistance. Amanda Tyler is Executive Director of the Baptist Joint Committee for Religious Liberty, leading the organization as it upholds the historic Baptist principle of religious liberty, defending the free exercise of religion and protecting against its establishment by the government. She is the lead organizer of BJC's Christians Against Christian Nationalism campaign and co-host of BJC's Respecting Religion podcast. Tyler is the author of How to End Christian Nationalism, published by Broadleaf Books on October 22nd, 2024. A member of the Texas and U.S. Supreme Court Bar, Tyler has experience working in Congress in a private legal practice and serving as law clerk for a federal judge. Welcome, Amanda Tyler.
Well, thank you so much, and wow, what a duo to follow this morning. So I think we are just so grateful and fortunate to have these incredible experts to draw on. I am here this morning, though, to provide a case study, a roadmap, if you will, for what advocates in states like Texas and other places around the country can do to push back against these incredibly extreme policies that we're seeing pop up. So I'll start the presentation, the Bluebonnet curriculum presentation at this point. Yeah, thank you. You just heard some of the many problems with the Bluebonnet reading and language arts lessons. In addition to the way that it teaches Bible stories in a devotional way, not the appropriate objective manner that would be appropriate in public schools, it also furthers this mythology of America as a Christian nation, this false history, cherry-picked history, and tries to indoctrinate that history at a very early age for young Texans. And so I myself am a product of Texas Public Schools. I lead, yes, I'm very proud of that, Austin Independent School District. But I lead this national organization, BJC. 2 years ago, my family and I moved back here to Texas. We live here in Dallas. And so I knew when I moved, we're going to have some opportunities to get more directly involved in what's going on. Little did I know just how quickly that would happen. And so Mark just mentioned this, but the 74, which is a nonpartisan, nonprofit news organization that covers America's education system, broke the story in May of 2024. Excellent reporting by Linda Jacobson, who's here at the conference, and brought our attention to these lessons. And then further brought my attention, Mark Chansey called me and said, I've started reading these lessons. There's some really problematic stuff in them. What can we do? And so as I go through, I'm gonna have several different lessons that we can draw. So lesson number one is the importance of independent and public journalism in this moment. And outlets like the 74, outlets like the Texas Tribune, these news outlets that tell the story, like journalists that are right here in this room today with Baptist News Global, these journalists are telling the story that is so important and that gets this news out. But lesson number two is that we have to do this work together. So throughout June and July of 2024, we started gathering, and this is just some of the groups that we worked with on this work, but we started combing through this curriculum, reading in depth, trying to figure out where are the problems, how do they violate people's religious freedom. And so many people in this room worked hand in hand with us at BJC on this work. And so lesson number two is just the importance of joining together with coalition members for strategy. Then we figured out, once we started reading this, there is an opportunity for action here. And so there was a public comment period that we were able to have. The public comments were due to the State Board of Education on August 16th. Okay, this stuff was broken at the very end of May. That's not a lot of time to read literally tens of thousands of pages of curriculum and then figure out a really Byzantine comment period on how to actually make our views known. So the groups that I just named on that prior slide, groups like Texas Impact and Texas Freedom Network, Jewish congregations, including Temple Emmanuel here in Dallas, ADL Texas, Shalom Austin, American Jewish Committee, and many, many more. We joined our collective efforts and hosted some online trainings for people to just learn how do you submit comments to the Texas Board, the Texas Education Agency, and submit testimony to the State Board of Education. It's something that I had never done personally, but we had to walk through. And so we had some really talented interns at BJC who put together this incredible presentation and walked people step by step on how to do the comments. So our lesson number 3 for us is we have to reduce the barriers for entry for people to engage in democracy. Our democratic system is not easy for people to navigate, and I'm not just talking about voting, I'm talking about making our views known. So as long as our institutions continue to allow public comments, and this is not a freedom that we should take for granted in this moment, we need to learn how to navigate the process and do it well. There was a deadline of August 16th for comments, and we found out from a very unlikely place. We found out from an avowed Christian nationalist, Lance Wallnau, who was kind of going ballistic on his social media, that there were 2,000 comments filed against the curriculum compared to 200 for it. We outnumbered the comments 10 to 1 because of this kind of organizing. And we knew that this was not just making a difference to the people who were reviewing this faulty curriculum, but it was also making a difference to the people who sat on the State Board of Education. Here's another excellent story from Linda Jacobson at the 74, where she's talking about that State Board of Education members are starting to ask questions, including Republican members on that board. Where did this come from? Turns out they file open records requests and they are not forthcoming, believe it or not, and they will not tell us where this comes from. But the reporting told us that some of this came from Hillsdale College, some of it came from the right-leaning Texas Public Policy Foundation, that they did bring in these quote-unquote experts to help write this faulty curriculum, and that story was starting to be told. Meanwhile, we knew that there was a public hearing coming up before the State Board of Education. It was coming up on September 10th. So in late August, we organized another online training to train advocates on how to actually show up and give public testimony. And we showed up. There were over 100 people who showed up to testify in person to the State Board of Education. This is a group of us that took a bus from Dallas to go down to Austin for a very long day. And our friends at Texas Freedom Network were great hosts for us, and we had all kinds of hospitality at the actual State Board of Education meeting to make it more comfortable for people to do this kind of advocacy. We also, Texas Freedom Network also organized a press conference there, and we had a wide variety of people both speaking at the press conference and testifying. Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Sikh, humanist, atheist, and more. And this is my 4th lesson. It's important to show up in these places and to show up with all of our identities, including our religious identities. And again, I said we outnumbered them 10 to 1 in the public comments. We outnumbered them 3 to 1 with people who actually showed up to testify in person. And one of my favorite moments of the day was there was a group from Moms for Liberty who was there, and they huddled up in the hallway, and they were like, who are these people? Where did they come from? And how can we get more people to show up? That's not usually the posture that they are in when they are trying to influence what's going on at public education. And so I did want to go ahead and give you an example very quickly of what one of these 2-minute speeches look like. I can't show you the whole 8 hours of testimony, but I'm going to show you this one speech to give you a feeling for what this looks like in person.
Hello, my name is Sarah. I live in Dallas. I am a product of Texas Free Public Schools. My daughters are as well, and they are public school elementary teachers in Bastrop ISD and Round Rock ISD. Public, not parochial schools are the sole educational system stipulated in our state constitution. That is our focus when we are in this state building. I am also a Christian, having been brought up in a Presbyterian congregation in Plano and many years later ordained to the gospel ministry by a Baptist congregation in Dallas. My ability to love God with my whole heart, soul, strength, and mind I owe to a lifetime of vacation Bible schools, Sunday schools, Wednesday night programs, and a seminary here in Austin. My public education and my Christian education have laid a foundation for who I am and am trying to be as a responsible, contributing citizen and as a faithful disciple of Jesus. There is overlap in these two aspects of who I am as a person, but there is no overlap in how I was taught. My parents did not send me to Sunday school to learn how to read. My parents did not send me to E.A. Sigler Elementary in Plano in 1965 to learn about Jesus. Incorporating Bible stories into the reading curriculums of our public school classrooms is a not so thinly veiled attempt at indoctrination. It removes the rights of parents to bring their children up in the faith context of their choosing, and prevents a skewed view of Christianity forward as the only possible faith choice. That is un-American, and in a state like Texas that values independence and freedom, a curriculum like this should be thrown out of this building. The focus of the State Board of Education is to assure top-notch educational content that Texans are capable of and so richly deserve. Thank you for being the advocates and the defenders for quality public education by denying approval of this curriculum with its blatant, appropriate, and unconstitutional methods of coercion.
Thank you for your patience. I think it was worth it. And you can yourself go to YouTube and watch all 8 hours of this hearing if you want and see all kinds of testimony. I wish I had time to show you more. We did the same thing. That was September. We did the same thing in November. And on November 18th, 2024, the State Board of Education took a vote. They, as you just saw, they did pass the Bluebonnet curriculum, although our comments did a lot to make changes to it along the way. Something else that happened along the way is this was a bipartisan vote against the curriculum. It passed 8-7. The 7 were made up of 4 Democrats and 3 Republicans. And this person, who's pictured in this story from the Tribune, is Leslie Racine. She was appointed by Governor Greg Abbott to temporarily fill a seat on the State Board of Education. She was named to that seat at the beginning of November, just 4 days before a Democrat won that seat on that panel. Why did he wait until right before the vote and right before the election to fill the seat? I think we know the answer. I think they thought that this bill was going to pass so easily that they didn't need to bother about that open seat, but then they did, because that was the deciding vote to pass this. So this brings me to my lesson number 5, that we have to be very intentional about how we define wins. Even though this curriculum passed, this was a win for local organizing, because we built relationships, we trained people on how to show up and to file comments, and we made it bipartisan in the opposition to this particular curriculum. So our wins in this work, particularly when we have so many headwinds coming at us, we have to think about the ways that we are building a long-term movement to sustain the work over time. This same coalition gathered again earlier this year to discuss ways that now that the curriculum had passed, that we could share our concerns with the curriculum directly with school administrators, the school administrators who would be deciding whether or not to use this curriculum. One point that we hadn't made before, why would a school district want this curriculum? We've said all the ways that it's bad instruction. Well, the state actually was bribing school districts to take this curriculum. They would get an extra $60 per student if they would use this curriculum over other curricula. And since we know that school districts are already vastly underfunded, it puts local schools in a terrible choice about how they're going to continue to educate their students. But even with that really pernicious piece of this policy, we have found out again from reporting from the 74 and from the Texas Tribune that only about 1 in 4 school districts have actually adopted this reading curriculum so far. And those that have, many of them are adapting the curriculum and taking the Bible stories out of the curriculum that they're using. And so again, we have to read past the headline and see that there are ways for us to make a difference. And so this story is still evolving, and that brings me to our final lesson. That is, we must never give up. Even when there are extreme policies passed by those policymakers in our jurisdictions, we still have enormous people power to do something about it and to raise the concerns in and with our communities to make a difference for all of us. Thank you.